Hello. Today we're going to be talking about red flags when you are looking at extended school year. Some of these red flags may come up in conversations at the IEP table. Some of these red flags might be seen before you even go to the IEP table. So, we are going to be talking about extended school year today. And not only some red flags to watch out for, but what you can do if you do see those red flags. And we also are going to slip in three shocking truths about extended school year. So, welcome. I'm glad you're here, either watching live or on the replay. This is the time of the year that a lot of teams are talking about extended school year. So I thought it would be the perfect time for us to have a live show about it. If you are new to our show, I'm Charmaine Tanner. I'm a parent, a retired teacher, a full-time advocate, and I also host this weekly Facebook Live show. So we are going to get into today. Say hi so I can welcome you here. And let's get started. So we've got 5 different red flags that we're going to talk about today that I want to make sure that you are on the watch for. But first, maybe we should talk about what is extended school year. Some parents, I think, get confused between summer school and extended school year. And extended school year is only for students with IEPs and only if they're eligible. So we'll be talking about eligibility for ESY here in a minute. But the other thing to look at is what the federal definition of extended school year is. And it means services, either special ed services and or related services like speech, OT, PT, that your child would be provided beyond the normal, 170, 180 school days. The extended school year, the goals and what's going to be working on, what your child will work on, and if they're even eligible, follows with the IEP process. Also, parents need to know that any extended school year services provided by the district is free, right? Because it's supposed to be free, appropriate public education. So no cost for extended school year services. And it has to meet the guidelines and standards with your state education agency. So as always, you want to know what your individual state regulations are concerning ESY. Also, the school district has the obligation and the responsibility to make sure for students that are eligible for ESY that they're provided those services in order for them to gain or receive that free, appropriate public education. Hey, Karen. The other thing that sometimes I think parents don't understand, and sometimes teachers might be confused too, is that a school district cannot limit ESY services to only one category of disability. So they can't say, oh, I'm sorry, we only do ESY for autistic students. It'd be like, oh, I should get my flag. That would be a red flag. So let's look at not 1, 2, 3, 4, but 5 different red flags I want you to be on the lookout for. So the first thing is this kind of, I don't know, merry-go-round meeting or something where it's very short and to the point. So if you've ever experienced this short, kind of matter-of-fact meeting about extended school year, but there really was never much discussion about it, or you certainly didn't have any input in it, that would be your first red flag. Because it follows the IEP process, it's important to know that as a parent, you also are an equal team member. And so you need to have input into what ESY services would look like for your child. So when you see a red flag, that gives you a cue. It's time to take action. So if there's this kind of already made up your mind notion when you get to the meeting, the action that you can take is to, just call for a timeout during the meeting, ask some more questions about extended school year, and make sure that you have this clear picture of what the school is or the district is talking about. If you don't understand, ask more questions. It's a-okay to do that. The other thing is, if the meeting has gone and like you get home and you're like, why didn't we ever really talk about ESY? That would be maybe a clue to request another meeting. So I do have a handout. Hey, Linda. And I have some sample questions and also sample emails in the handout. So if you are on my, if you currently get my weekly emails, then you will get this email with the handout. If you don't get my emails with handouts, go to iep.today /weekly adv tips. But yeah, the handout is going to have more details in it for you. And let's see. So the second red flag is if you get the say you get the draft IEP home, and you're looking at the draft IEP and you notice that when it's talking about ESY, the box is already checked no. Okay, that would be a red flag, right? Oops. I got to remember where I'm clicking here. Oh dear. So if no was already checked before you even have a meeting, that's going to be your hint that you need to take some action, right? And so you could email the special ed teacher and say, I noticed on the draft IEP for ESY, it's already, checked no. I would, I'm requesting an IEP meeting to discuss this with the team. And as I said, there's some sample emails in the handouts that you can check out. Yes, happy March 17th. I know, it was like, shoot, I didn't wear anything green today. I do have somewhere green glasses, I thought. I don't know. I know. Oh, here they are. So I know I'm not Irish, but today I am. Yes, March 5th, 17th. That means we're close to spring break, all that good stuff, right? Okie dokie. So, this could also be a red flag when you hear from the district and they say, your child is doing so good, they're making progress. They're not eligible for extended school year. They're doing great. Um, and so, on one hand, you want to celebrate, right, when your child is making progress. On the other hand, if you are kind of doubting that your child made that much progress this year, that would be another reason for you to make sure you take some action. And so the action you can take is ask the staff to share the data that they've collected to show progress. Because you need to be able to see what they're basing that, judgment on that your child, doesn't qualify for ESY. And in the handout, there's also examples of different data sources. So, there's other ways, looking at pre and post tests, looking at work samples, however they're using, whatever method they're using for progress monitoring, you want to see that information. Um, And so Linda has a question. She says, oops, can ESY be anytime during the school year to include tutoring services after school? Good question. Um, and we are going to talk about that in a minute. Yes, typically ESY is thought of for, the summer months. However, there are other breaks during the year. And I think, Linda, I haven't ever had an example like this, but I would guess that you could make a case for after after school tutoring because that's beyond the normal school hours, right? Um, and what state are you in, Linda? Because that's the other thing is to make sure um, that you check with your own state regs. And Dahlia says maintaining same level for the past years, and they do not provide collection for data or of data. Um, yeah, so that's a problem, right? If your child throughout the school year is just pretty, staying pretty level with their progress, that's something that you can request an IEP team meeting for and say, we need to look at this because look how many months, how many years, his IEP goals have been the same. There hasn't been any progress. If you've requested data and they haven't shown it to you or, shared it with you, you can do a more official letter requesting educational records. Um, and there are some templates for that. I know in our Trailblazer group I have a template that I use. But yeah, you need to push that and keep that topic going because that's not appropriate for your child to just kind of maintain. Linda, you're in Florida, so yeah. She says, I think ESY can be anytime after the regular school day. And you're probably, I would, like I said, I think you can make a case for that because ESY talks about being outside the normal school year. And so after school is outside the normal school year. Um, and the other thing, because of COVID and everything, I know some families are getting compensatory ed services as tutoring after school. So if you can't get it using through ESY, you may be able to get that through comp ed, just kind of depending on what the individual situation is. Yeah, and Delia said no, that her child is just stagnating. Yeah, and that's not okay. You can't accept that. So yeah, for sure, you need to call an IEP meeting and talk about that stagnation. Um, yeah, it's like I said, I don't know, if you want to contact me, and send me a private message. The other thing we could do is set up, because I do offer free phone consultations with families. So, Dahlia, maybe that would be something that we could do. We could talk about that on the phone because that is that is not okay. Um, the fourth red flag that you might see is when the district says, well, your child hasn't had any regression. There's not a problem with relearning those skills. So they don't really need ESY services. And like I said, that could be true, but you also want to kind of check that. So you would want to see again some kind of data, and you would want to especially look at how your child was doing before a vacation, like before the winter break, and then how the child was doing when they came back. And if teachers haven't been collecting that data before vacations and after vacations, they can't really say, well, we don't have that data, so we're not going to provide ESY. Um, it shouldn't be, a case where the child has to fail before they get ESY services. So the other thing is to be proactive and to really, throughout the year, you need to be looking at the progress monitoring information that you're being sent home. If you don't have progress reports that aren't really helpful, aren't telling you very much, that's going to be kind of a glitch when you come to the spring and start talking about ESY and you don't have any data to make decisions on. um, so yeah, I often tell parents you have to become the IEP police, and you have to really kind of keep an eye on things and hold the school accountable for things like progress reports. Joseph is here and says we had a win this school year with adding one-on-one for after school activities, getting to participate in run club with friends and have the aid there for encouragement. So yes, 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 that is a big win. Yeah, a lot of times parents don't realize that for after school activities that are, school sponsored, extracurricular clubs and such, that if your child needs support, that needs to be written in the IEP and provided. So cool. We like when we get good news, right? Um, so let's keep on here. If we look at this fourth red flag of when they say no, there hasn't been any regression, there hasn't been any recoupment issues. If that is something you're hearing, then that is going to be your cue again that you need to take some action. So, this would be a time where it's really important to know not only the federal regulations, but your state regulations for ESY. And so, Linda, if you want, we can later I could look up Florida's rules on ESY and I could give you the link for that. And in the handout, I'll have the federal regulations. Um, yeah. So Melinda, the link is to sign up for the email because then I'll be emailing that out. I don't know if I'll get it out tomorrow morning or Monday. But yes, if you sign up there, then you'll automatically get the handout when I send it out. Okie dokie. Thanks for asking. Now here's here's another situation that you might come into, and this is our fifth red flag that you want to watch out for. And this is when the staff just kind of, you know, I don't know, quickly gives you the dates and the times for the district ESY program. So often, you'll hear, well, ESY starts on June 6th. We go through, July 2nd. It's Monday through Thursday, 8:30 to 11:30. And when things like that are said, it's like a red flag because it's like, oh, well, this sounds like it's already been predetermined. And we know predetermination is a huge problem, right? And so if they say, this is what we offer, that's your hint, that's your clue to take some action, right? Because if you don't take action and change things, then that keeps happening. So it's important to know that the type of ESY services that your child's going to receive, the frequency, how often, how many days, the duration, how long it's going to last, those are to be based on your child's unique needs, not based on what the district says this is our schedule this year for ESY. So again, yeah, you've got to, and Laura says yes, predetermination versus, yeah, a staffing decision. So that's really important. And we're going to talk a little bit, and I have more examples too, about the variety of options that parents really can look at when you're looking at extended school year services. And I think so many times we think that's going to be in one of the district's buildings, it's going to be with, probably a different teacher, probably a different para, but district staff. And guess what? You can, depending on your child's needs, make a case for something very different for extended school year. And we'll talk about that in a couple minutes. Um, let's see. So, yes, Melinda will get you that handout. And now, this is a bonus red flag that you sometimes will see. And that is when they say, well, the least restrictive environment doesn't really apply to extended school year. Now, I think this is probably a pretty common response. And I think we need to stop accepting that, right? And so I'm going to encourage you, if you hear, well, LRE doesn't really apply for ESY, I want you to take some action and look at how important the concept of least restrictive environment is, and talk about that at your IEP or your ARD meeting, and ask them for a justification. Why can your child receive, inclusive services, be around typical peers during the school year, and then suddenly at ESY that goes away? This is something that's not going to probably be, a suggestion that the district is going to want to follow. Um, However, I still think it's a discussion, because if we don't keep bringing things up like this, it never changes, right? Um, yeah. So Angie, hey, Angie's from Nebraska, and Angie says, our school goes out of the way to prove no regression. Yeah, and it's like I said, it's one of those things that most states also have other factors, and we'll talk about these in a minute. So many of us, I think, are kind of conditioned to think that extended school year is only about if your child regresses, they lose a lot of skills after a break in the year. And recoupment is, how long does it take them to pick those skills back up again? For most kids, when they have, several months off or a couple of months off for, a summer vacation, most students, when they come back in the fall, they have forgotten some of those skills that maybe they were just learning in the spring. And teachers have to reteach some of that. But usually that doesn't take that long. For some students, if you're looking at their progress monitoring data and you're showing week after week after week, they still don't remember those skills that they maybe had mastered in the spring. That's when that would come into play for saying, yeah, they really need extended school year. However, there's other factors too. So just because they might not have regression and recoupment, they might still have other needs that, in order for them to have FAPE, they need to have those services when there's breaks in the school year. So Laura says, what about vacation, ESY, and shared parenting agreements for June versus July? Yeah, and I think, the district is probably going to say, sorry, this is what we do. And if you want it to be other dates than what the district typically does, then you're going to have to really make that case based on your child's needs. If they know it's a scheduling problem with vacations and things like that, that's not going to be something that they're really obligated to provide and to plan around. So if you want the dates to be different, you really have to be able to, have some reasons for that. So, for some students, it's, instead of just 4 weeks of extended school year during the summer, maybe they need 6 weeks. And, depending on your child, maybe they have the services 1 week, they take the next week off, they have services the next week, so you spread out the services for a longer period of time. It's up to your team, your IEP team, which you're a member of, to come up with creative ideas. It's okay to think outside of that ESY box. But as a parent, you need to be kind of brainstorming some other options. What could this look like? So that would be important. And recovery services during ESY. So, do you mean recovery as far as compensatory ed? Um, Compensatory ed, in my point of view, I'm not an attorney, but to me, compensatory ed services are, compensating your child for missed services. And so they really are two different things between comp ed and ESY. And so you have to really be careful. Some students might qualify for both, but you don't want them happening at the same time. It like defeats the purpose of this is extra that you get. And ESY is not to make up for, during COVID when your child didn't get, the appropriate services. So you really want to, yeah. So I would say with COVID recovery, you really want to keep that as two separate items, two separate discussions. So yeah, that would be important. So keep your questions and comments coming because now we're going to look at some shocking, shocking secrets about extended school year. So, one, did you know that extended school year is not even mentioned in the statute IDEA? It's like, what? Even Kramer can't believe it. What? Yeah, ESY is not in the law, IDEA. So look here. It's not mentioned in the law, but guess what? It is in IDEA regulations. So it's so funny because we just assume, right, that ESY would be in the law, but it's not. It's in the regulations. And so, like I said in the handout that I have, there'll be a summary of the federal regulations. And if you're in if you're in a state and you would like to find out what your state regs are and you're not sure how to do that, just leave me a comment and I can look that up for you and give you the link. But I was amazed the first time. It was like, what? It's not even in the law? No, the trick is it's in the regulations. But guess what? In the regulations, the IDEA regulations, there's no wording that says what the specific criteria is for determining if a child is eligible for ESY or not. So if your district says to you, well, this is how we have to do it, this is what, IDEA tells us what to do. And it's like, guess what? It's shocking, but IDEA regs aren't going to tell you what the criteria is. And that's why you have to know your state regs. So it depends on where you live. And that can be frustrating, especially for families that are moving from state to state. It's like, what? Now these rules have changed on us? Yes. because the federal regulations leave it up to the state to determine the criteria. So I think that's pretty amazing, don't you? Kim is here from Iowa, and she says, just checking in, but for us, we have switched to having Jameson's ESY at the end of the summer, starting about mid-July and ending 1 week before school starts. I have found it's a good way to jumpstart a school year rather than extend from May. Yeah, and that's a great example, Chris. Kim, thanks for sharing that, because that's what we pretty much did with our son Dylan. He would, qualify for extended school year services. But instead of saying, yeah, we're going to do it right after school's out, for the summer, we moved it to before, like in August. So it would be, several weeks before school actually started. And so that is some of the, flexibility that you have. Again, you have to make a good case for why you want your child to have it other than what they're offering, right? Because what they're going to do is want to keep asking you to accept what they're offering versus let's figure out if this really meets my child's needs. The other big thing about ESY is in most states, it's only there to help your child maintain their skills. And it's like, why would our goal why would our goal be we just want kids to maintain, right? It's like, but if you read most state regulations for ESY, that's what they talk about. But they also will talk about other factors. Like if it's an emerging skill that your child is, this spring is just starting to kind of get the hang of, and it's like, oh my gosh, now we're going to take, a couple months off. It's not going to work. So again, check your state regs, but a lot of states will say if there's an emerging skill, your child could qualify for ESY based on that. So Karen is in Colorado. She says they're really stingy about ESY here. Not once have they said Emil is eligible. So yeah, so have you really had discussions, Karen? Or do they just say he's not eligible and they check the box and go on? And Karen and Kim are a couple of our trailblazers. So Karen, if you can come to our after the show in our Trailblazer group, we can talk about that some more. But yeah, I mean, there's supposed to be a discussion about it. And Colorado actually has some really good um, guidelines for ESY. So I'll make sure that you have the link for that too, Karen. And Joseph says, we are in Corpus Christi, Texas, and we get 4 weeks of ESY, Monday through Thursday. It's a half a day. At our meeting, we choose 2 or 3 goals from the academic goals and maybe a social one. And so, yeah, and that's what I was saying is like, I mean, maybe that meets your child's needs and that's fine. But the assumption that the district comes from is, to me, one of predetermination when they say we have ESY for 4 weeks, half days, da, 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 da. That's not individualized at all, right? And then the other thing to look at is if your child does have, goals that are more around social aspects. If your child's going to be in a special ed class for ESY services and there's not going to be any, general ed classes going on that they can be included with, then especially if you're looking at social goals, that probably isn't the best situation, right? I have helped a parent advocate, and we were able to get more of a park and rec program for her son during the summer, because that's exactly where, she was wanting, is for him to be around typical peers to learn those social skills. And that wasn't going to happen in a segregated ESY class. And so it took a lot of advocating. Again, the district's not going to say, great idea. Why didn't we think of that? They're going to push back and want you to take what they give everybody else. But there are times when you can advocate for that. And then the other situation that comes to mind is was a younger student, and the district had so many cool summer programs. Um, and they were, like a lot of different interests and things like that. But this student was like an excellent artist. And so the school district had typical art programs going on that they were offering in the summer, and that's what we advocated for this child. And again, it was mainly, for that socialization and being with typical peers. And again, the district said, no, you can't go to that art program for ESY. You have to do this, at this building with these new teachers. And so, again, it just took persistence on our part to have the district understand that ESY can be individualized, and ESY can look different than what everybody else is doing. And Laura says, can you have a full day ESY with related services if that's what your child needs? Yes. So in the regulations, in the federal regulations, how they define ESY is they say it's special education services and or related services. And so that would be, like your speech or OT or PT. So maybe your student would have more academic subjects in the morning, and then they would have lunch. And then after that, they would get their related service time. And if that's what your child needs, again, you have to make a case for it and figure out your arguments ahead of time, right? But yeah, bring that up at the IEP table as an option. And Joseph said, I'm glad you brought that up. Thank you. You're welcome. Yeah. And so that's why these weekly groups are nice. We can get together and share different things, and you can see what other states are doing. So, just here today, we've got, several different states. And you've seen, people being stingy and not saying your child's eligible, to people being flexible and say, if your child needs it at the end of summer instead of the beginning, we'll do that. So that's the thing. The other point, or the other shocking truth about ESY, is that they don't only have to happen during summer vacation. And typically, this is what we think of, right? It's like, oh, well, we're going to be out for summer break. Let's start talking about ESY. Oops, it may shock you, but let me see. It's like, what? Some students may need extended school year services over winter break. During breaks, if they're on a year-round school schedule. So don't just think about summer is the only time that your child can receive ESY services. And of course, if you ask for your child to receive ESY services, during like winter break, the district is going to probably say, we don't do that here. But guess what? That doesn't mean that they can't. They could start doing something different, right? I know some schools will have 2 or 3 weeks off for a fall break. Well, that amount of time for some students that need that routine and that schedule, that can be, that 2 or 3 weeks can really have an impact on their learning. So look at your school calendar, and are there other times during the year when there's a significant break for your child? What would be considered significant for your child? And talk to the team about, we need to look at extended school year services for these breaks in the school year also. Kathleen, hello. She says, how long in advance of the ESY program starting do you request information on the specific program? How long does this negotiation usually take? This is our first year considering ESY. So, Kathleen, you can look on your child's IEP and see when you last had your meeting, if ESY was brought up. If it was brought up, then it probably has yes or no checked on the IEP. Sometimes on the IEP, it will say to be determined. This is March, right? So I would request a meeting now if you haven't talked about ESY before for your child this year. Because you do want to make sure that you get that conversation going and you have enough time. It might take 2 meetings, so you want to plan so you have enough time. But then also the district wants to have enough time to plan what are the different, ESY programs that we're going to be supporting, and they have to figure out staffing and all those good things. But that's on the district for planning, right? That's not a reason for your child not to get services because they don't know if they have enough staff. So my suggestion would be to request an IEP meeting within the next couple of weeks, and you can do it as an amendment to the IEP when you talk about extended school year services, and then the whole team doesn't have to be there. Or some school districts prefer having the whole team there when you talk about ESY. And the other thing to think about is which goals in the IEP do you think you would want your child to continue to work on through ESY? Because typically for ESY, the team is going to go through the IEP and look at your child's goals, and they're going to look for the goals that maybe are an emerging skill and they want to support that during ESY. They're going to look at IEP goals where your child has made some regression or maybe isn't making very much progress, things like that. So the IEP team, which you're a member of, will pick which goals in the IEP they want to have your child work on during ESY. It's not usually all the goals in the IEP, but as a parent, you get input, on what those goals would be. So Kathleen, yeah, and what state are you in? Kathleen says, "Thank, that's really helpful. It's been brought up verbally, but not in writing yet." Yeah, so just you want to make sure that all of that gets written down, right? To what age can they continue ESY? Yeah, and that would again depend on your state. A lot of states, it's the semester when your child turns 21. Some states it's 22. Michigan I think is 25. So whatever your state regs are on how long your child gets IDEA services, that would also apply for ESY. So Washington, yeah. So if you want, Kathleen, we can look, I can look that up and post it in the comments for you. And Delia says she's in Minnesota. And Linda says, can you establish specific goals for ESY? Usually in most states, ESY is just to maintain the skills that your child has had. So if it's a new goal that they haven't even worked on yet during the regular school year, you're probably not going to convince them to add that, add a new and different goal for ESY. It's usually And again, like I said, some states have other factors, but it usually comes, the goals for ESY would come from the current IEP. Um, so you guys have some good questions and comments. Keep them coming. Um, what else? What else? What else? So let's. Anne Marie is from South Carolina, and she's a trailblazer too. She said, "Is there any suggestions for getting an OG Orton Gillingham tutor for the summer for ESY?" I mean, you would have to make again your case for why that would be needed. Now, the one thing that you want to look at is, was your daughter in getting any, you know, Orton Gillingham reading services during the year? Again, I think you would have a harder time if Orton Gillingham reading, curriculum wasn't being used during the year. I think it's going to be harder to make your case that now we're going to use that for ESY. I've had more parents be successful getting things like Orton, tutors that are trained in Orton Gillingham to provide that tutoring under compensatory ed services. Um, so if you have a situation where your child has, lost a lot of services during COVID, you can again have an IEP meeting and talk about compensatory services and then bring up the tutoring there. So, how do we determine the number of ESY weeks? And they said usually the school offers a standard 4 or 6 weeks. And, that is something that can be individualized. I mean, what you could do is think about how many weeks would it be when ESY ends and the new school year starts? Is that still going to be a chunk of time that your child really should be getting services? Or if you want to shift, like Kim is doing in Iowa, and have ESY services towards the end of summer, like then how long since school gets out to when ESY starts? How many weeks is that gap going to be? And do you think your child needs services there? Um, Again, it depends on the parent making a case for it, because whenever we ask for something that school districts don't usually offer, um, you're usually going to get pushback, right? And so sometimes parents have used like private therapists to say, this amount of time without any kind of services would jeopardize your child's, momentum to maintain those services. Or like I said, if it's an emerging skill. So sometimes getting outside opinions or a doctor, usually doctors, a lot of parents will say, I'll get my doctor to write a note that my child needs ESY. And, because doctors come from the medical field, they really aren't ones that can, well, make any decisions about your child's education. They can give input, but it usually doesn't have as much, hold as much value as, say, a therapist or somebody that's been working with your child, um, and they know, this is a skill that they're just starting to learn. We got to make sure that they keep having these services, when the school is out. So yeah, there's not a formula or anything like that to pick a magic number of weeks. It depends. And, for some children, maybe a half day, 4 days a week is not going to work. Maybe they need 2 hours, 5 days a week. So, yeah, it just really is individualized. It's supposed to be individualized. um, but we don't often see that happen. So, any other questions? I'm going to look through here. Um, So Linda says, also, if the answer is they don't have resources in the school during breaks, etc., due to contracts, it can be farmed out to a private provider. Yeah, exactly. Because I've heard, schools talk about that. It's like, well, our teachers are only under contract for so many days, and it's like, okay. And that's like not up to you to solve as the parent. But yeah, I mean, then they have to contract with somebody else. They have a contracted employee for the amount of time of ESY. So we can't let districts' financial resources, staff resources be reasons why our kids don't get their free, appropriate public education. They're entitled to that, and the school district has to solve the dilemmas that they have. Um, oh, MC from Massachusetts. Hey, MC. So let us know. Has your child in the past gotten ESY services, and what did they look like? Um, so Karen was saying that they've gotten compensatory services over the summer, but never ESY. And, like I said, those are two different things. And if your child's getting compensatory services, then maybe they don't need ESY services, right? And then there's the whole thing of like, how much school do we want our kids to do during the summer? Um, and are there other activities that your family can be involved in, that your child can be involved in? And maybe they don't need ESY. I mean, just because they're on an IEP doesn't mean like, oh, they should go to, school during, these other months too. Maybe you choose not to, and you have your own things that your family is going to be involved in, and that's going to be fine. So don't feel like you're pressured to have to accept those services, because maybe it's okay. It's okay, right? um I'm looking. Any other questions? Questions. We're almost at the top of the hour. Next Thursday, I'm debating if I'm going to take Thursday off for a day off for spring break, or if I don't take a day off next Thursday, we would have a kind of open mic time, and you can ask any questions you have. The following Thursday, the last Thursday of the month, March 31st, we are having Julie Costin and Christy Preri Franzak back to talk about how to make any lesson more inclusive. So that's what we have coming up. We have some more surprises for April. But thank you for being here. And if you're watching the replay, you can still put in questions. And let's see. And says, I'm still waiting to find out if the school is offering summer school, but that is probably based on criteria also. Yeah, and thanks for bringing that up, Anne, because maybe you want your child to go to the typical summer school, and that's where they're going to get supports, and you're going to ask for extra supports to be in the classroom for summer school. That's an option. And then for sure, right, they're going to be with other students in general ed and have that time to be included. So that's another option you could ask for. And Linda says, don't many states have requirements for recovery services, not necessarily compensatory, due to delays from not being able to attend? Yeah, and And a lot of states are calling that recovery services because they don't like to call it compensatory. They don't like to feel like they're at blame for not giving your child something, and now they have to compensate your child for that. So I know in Idaho they use recovery services, but they're talking about recovery from not having services during COVID. Let them call it recovery if they want. That's fine. But technically, it's really compensatory. And that's different than ESY. And Linda says, thank you, informative as always. Yay. And Karen's going to be doing book fair and conferences next week. So it's okay if I take a day off. I might do that. Thank you for your input. Thank you guys for being here. And if you think of questions later, like, shoot, I wish I would have asked this, come back and type your question in because I'll be circling back. If you're watching the replay, type in your questions and comments because I'll be coming back. And Donna has a question. She said, first year preschooler and special education placement, school saying that they don't have enough data to show there's a need for ESY. True, there needs to be a certain amount of time for data. However, you know, it's also a time where we don't want to, say, well, we don't have enough data. So, Donna, I don't know what state you're in. Some states will have other factors that can be considered. And so regression, recoupment, that data, sometimes they don't have it, and you need to ask why. But if they don't have it, they don't have it. So you can see if there's other factors in your state that would allow your child to qualify for ESY, if you even want that, right? No, you're fine, Donna. So yeah, so put in what state you're in, but I mean, if your child's been receiving services all school year, they should have enough data. But data isn't the only thing that will kind of give your ticket to ESY. And Donna says, yes, in Virginia, we'll look at other factors. There is. Yeah, that would be great. Cool. So if you are new here, also know I mentioned earlier that I do provide free half-hour phone consultations with new families. So if that's something you're interested in, let me know. But we will be back either next Thursday for Q&A, but for sure, March 31st, Julie Costin and her sidekick, Christy, will both be here talking about inclusive lesson plans. So where are my green glasses? Go out and have fun. I don't really like corned beef and cabbage. I don't know about you. And I don't really like green beer, but I don't know. I can have fun with my glasses today, right? So happy St. Patrick's Day.